The topic is Zionist education for the next generation, but I didn't expect the next generation to be in the classroom. So I'm going to be tested throughout this entire presentation, which is fantastic. I've never had that opportunity before to talk about the theory of it and to get immediate feedback if what I'm talking about can work or not. So this should be fun for all of us. I'd love to know who everybody is in the room, but given our time, if I started going around, we would not get to what we are all here for. But the students here are in grades 10 and 9. Okay? And I know some of you are missing your English lesson, which is why I'm doing this in English and not in Spanish, so that you can tell your teachers you got some English as well. And the teachers that we have here, I know we have one from Toronto and from Los Angeles. Others, where are you? How many are from here in Mexico City? Okay, and who did I leave out? Where are Israel. Costa Rica. Okay. All right, so we've got a diverse group, both in terms of geography and in terms of where people are in their lives. How many of the teachers are involved directly in teaching about Israel? Okay, and the others are just interested. Okay, good. So let's start with the first slide. The first slide that we have up here. I hope everybody can see well enough. You can choose the language that you want. It's up there in English, Hebrew, and Spanish. The title itself, From Out Neuland to Tel Aviv. Anybody have an idea of what that says? Or I'll ask you, does it say anything to you? Out Neuland. How many of you know what Out Neuland is? Okay. Anybody want to?
Out Neuland is the book that Herzl wrote, and Out Neuland is basically what we call Tel Aviv today.
Ah, okay. So you already skipped ahead. Out Neuland in German is old, new land, and indeed when Sokolov translated Out Neuland into Hebrew, he took the title Tel Aviv. Why Tel Aviv? How is Tel Aviv a translation of old new land? What's a tel?
How?
Sorry? A givah. But what's the givah made of? It's an archaeological phenomenon. A tel is like a hill, but it's a hill that's made up of. Anybody have any idea? Well, when you get to Israel, you'll see lots of tels, and you'll find out. A tel it's a hill that's been built up on the remains of earliest civilizations. The buildings that were destroyed, just built up one on top of the other. And you get this hill formed out of old things. And Aviv, what's Aviv mean? Spring, okay? Spring represents new, okay? So you have Tel Aviv, you have the old from the archaeological ruins, you have the Aviv, the new. So it's the translation of that. The book itself, Out Neuland. What's the book about that Herzl wrote?
The dream of Herzl.
Excellent. Okay, it's his dream of what this Jewish state was going to look like. And in fact, I even have copies here in Spanish. I just realized, so somebody's going to get the copy in Spanish who wants it. It's a utopian novel that Herzl wrote describing in incredible detail what this state that he imagined coming into being was going to look like. And we're going to see quotes from the book shortly, so you'll get an idea of it. But it's really an exemplary society in every way. And I use the phrase from Out Neuland to Tel Aviv as a way of taking a look at what Herzl imagined would come into being and the realities of Israel today and the gap between the two and what our role might be, first of all, if we like Herzl's vision of what the Jewish state is going to look like, and what our role might be in transforming Israel from the realities of today to the dreams of yesterday that might also become our dreams of tomorrow. And for me, this is really the kind of Zionist education that we should be doing, which is why I have this down here, of understanding what the dreams are, understanding what the realities are, and where we might go, how we might go from one to the other. This is a statement that we have up here. I'll read it. We as a community need to renew Zionist education, an issue we've neglected. And we are seeing some of the results with younger people now. Since 1948, we've asked people to rally for Israel, and they did. But we didn't provide the educational frameworks that would allow them to grapple with the challenge of developing their own vision of what Israel can and should be. This was a statement written by a very prominent leader of the American Jewish community. And my first question is, whether what was written here by John Ruskay is indeed the case in the communities that you are from. For the teachers, I would ask if you feel that you're doing a Zionist education that allows the students to develop their own vision. And to the students, I would ask, are you getting an education about Israel that allows you to really think for yourself what the whole idea of a Jewish state is all about? Anybody want to respond as to whether or not John Ruskay's statement is relevant to your environment?
Sure. When did he write this?
This was just a few years ago.
I can tell you in a nutshell, I work in a high school in Los Angeles where we are Zionists, but we do not consider our studies as a Zionist education. We would broaden into Israel education or having the Israel context within Jewish education. So we do not have a Zionist education per se.
Students, do you feel you're getting a Zionist education here in Beit Sefer Tabut?
Well, I think there's more of education of Zionism in the Mundo.
Aha, okay, excellent. So what's the difference? Great comment. What's the difference between the way you're learning about Israel in the Torah and the way you might be learning about Israel in school?
Not our optional. Lots of people don't go. I don't think we get as much Zionist education.
Okay. What would Zionist education look like in school?
History of Israel and everything that had to happen for Israel to be like.
But we don't see much of Israel nowadays. We see more of Israel history, but like I know what is happening right now in Israel because of the Quran, not because of school.
Okay, interesting. So what you're learning about it, sorry, yeah. No, please.
Okay, so on school we also have part of optional learning that we have Hidon. So I think that we are the ones that are, I think most of us are here. Because of the Hidon, and we are the ones that are learning about Zionism on that special and optional class more than in school.
Okay, interesting. How many of you are taking part in the Chidon Tziyuni? Oh, a good number of you. Okay.
I think that it's not only a matter about learning about Israel, but teaching, I don't know if the word is teaching, but making the kids love Israel, you know? I think that to be a Zionist, it doesn't mean that I have to know all the details about Israel, about the culture, and that it's more like be a partner with Israel, you know, like be their ally in all the situations.
Okay, so it's developing a love for Israel.
I think that what Ada said is right, but many kids from the school, when you say to them Israel, they just think about food or people who are famous, and I think that to be a Zionist is to identify with Israel, but I don't think that in school we learn a lot of reasons why we should identify with this. Instead we just, Israel, falafel, dalgadot, and I don't think that is the right way.
Okay.
Ways.
Okay, important comment. Good, we'll get into that, we'll get back to that in a little bit. In terms of what you do know about Israel today and things that are going on in Israel today, whether it's from the school or from the youth movements or from CNN or the newspapers and so on and so forth, what are some of the issues that you feel are important in Israel today? What are some of the things that are occupying us who live in Israel in terms of what's going on there? Politics, elections.
Relations between diaspora and Israel.
Oh, in what sense?
In the not just in the religious kind of way, but also when, for example, Netanyahu said that congratulate Trump for the wall and
technology, new developments, new things.
Okay, so all of the high tech and the startup nation is part of it?
Corruption.
Corruption, excellent, thank you. Good. No, that's important because I think as educators, we very often don't want to touch those things of corruption. I'm glad it came from you because it's there. And if we want to teach the love of Israel, I think we need to make sure that people know about the corruption, because if I love a make-believe Israel and not all of Israel, my love might dissipate. Yeah.
Society.
Okay, what in society?
How the people, differences of the Israeli people.
Okay, so with that also some of the tensions within the Israeli society.
Educational issues.
Sorry?
Educational issues.
Educational issues.
Like,
examples?
Like some of the system try to make a lesson plan according to the beliefs. Another part of Kironi and
Dati.
And they have a trouble there to agree the same way to make the whole system for everybody.
Right, okay, there was a big issue in Israel. It's maybe hard for you to believe, but the Haredi ultra-Orthodox schools don't teach what's called the Limudei Liba, the fundamentals of science and of math and of English and so on, feeling that everything they need to know is in Sifrei Kodesh, in traditional classical texts. Okay, so there are those issues as well. And some of these issues, at least again, and I'm sorry to go back to the United States, but again I want to use it as a reflection here. For several decades, the Jewish establishment has asked American Jews to check their liberalism at Zionism's door. Okay? That Jews in America, at least, are generally liberal in their outlook. A lot of things that are going on in Israel, some of the issues that you mentioned here, make it uncomfortable for liberal Jews in America to support Israel. So Peter Beinart, who wrote the book, The Failure of the, that's an article, The Failure of the American Jewish Establishment, was saying basically to young people, look, if you're going in order to love Israel, leave your liberal values at Zionism's door. And now to their horror, they are finding that many young Jews have checked their Zionism instead, and have said being liberal is more important than being Zionist. So again I ask, is this relevant to the countries that you live in? Do any of you feel that tension? And if you don't, that's fine. But in general, I don't know, if elections were held today among the year 9 and 10 students at Tarbut, you mentioned the elections. Who would you be voting for?
We did
You did an election,
yes,
right?
we did two elections for the school, and the students.
Anybody want to share the results?
I made a
Dilo en español.
survey and it put me that if I will vote, I will go to Cajol Laban.
Okay. Why?
Like because of the answers that I put on the survey.
An example, I think if I asked a lot of Israelis what Kahol Lavan stands for, it would be hard for them to say. So I don't want to put anybody on the spot. But anybody want to share what they know about one of the parties or another and views and why they are in favor of them or against them?
So I did the same test, and it said that I will vote for a party that it's now, I think, with Avodah, that it's called Gesher, and then we investigated a little bit, and I believe I would vote for that because I believe it's for all the citizens and wants to solve the problems in the society that for me is more relevant. But I live outside, so I can't really say what's more important for Israel.
Okay, that's great. Though you're talking, the Gesher party indeed has a very social agenda of trying to bridge gaps of inequality and so on and so forth. So that's important to you.
And listening to the answers, they answer about Kahol Lavan or Avodah or the Israeli parties. But what about here? You live in Mexico, right? You live in Mexico. Do you see yourself liberal? Who do you vote for? You live here. You're a Jewish Mexican student.
Who would vote in Mexico, you mean?
Yeah, in terms of their values. David asked about liberal. They asked about liberal.
People in Mexico's based out of the government's based out of corruption and every president.
We don't vote for
It doesn't matter the party, everyone's it doesn't matter for.
Okay, so we'll keep these questions in mind. We'll go on to, I don't want to spend too much time on this. Another leader, Peter Beinart, is known as being very far on the left. Ronald Lauder is much more on the right. And he says that over the last decade, I have visited Jewish communities in over 40 countries. Members in every one of them expressed to me their concern and anxiety about Israel's future and its relationship to diaspora Jewry. An increasing number of Jewish millennials are distancing themselves from Israel because its policies contradict their values. The results are unsurprising: assimilation, alienation, and a severe erosion of the global Jewish community's affinity for the Jewish homeland. My feeling from the little I know of the Mexican Jewish community is that maybe Ronald Lauder didn't visit Mexico because sorry, or he wouldn't have included it probably in this statement. You, as young people, you feel well. I'll ask you. How comfortable do you feel with Israel and your relationship to Israel and being supportive of Israel? Down? Okay, good. Tell me why.
I don't know. I never know anything about Israel, and that's my fault because many people investigate about Israel, but I didn't, and I feel that my relationship with Israel is bad.
Okay. Someone else?
I don't know if you mean that this is what we're supposed to answer, but I think that I feel very happy that we have Israel because I know that for a fact that if somebody has a problem in Mexico or here, you can just like that you can go to Israel and people will welcome you with open arms. And I think that's something no one else has, and it's amazing.
Okay, good. I'm glad you have that feeling, and I think it's true. Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to just run quickly through what some of the concerns are that again may not be relevant to here, but I think particularly as educators we have to be concerned that some of the things that are happening a bit north of here in the United States may end up trickling down through the border since the wall hasn't been built yet. There may be certain feelings that will come down that we have to be aware of, even if they're not things that we're dealing with right at this moment. So this is one survey that was done of the degree to which young Jews in the United States feel connected to Israel. And I've divided it here into ages of 18 to 34 and ages 65 and over. And in the ages of 18 to 34, only 11% said that they feel very attached to Israel. 38% said Israel's existence is very important. Less than half of the population said that Israel's existence is important. Even less than half said that they even feel comfortable with the idea of a Jewish state. And 32% said that they sympathize more with the Palestinians than with the Israelis. And if
the rest of the percentage, because they sympathize more with the Palestinians?
No, a third said that they sympathize more with Israel than with the others were somewhere in between. But what I want to compare it to is the ages of 65 plus. And you can see the huge difference in the generation. And again, far be it for me to suggest or to say if that's at all a phenomenon that's taking place in Mexico in terms of the generational differences. But I do think it's something to be aware of.
Have you replied this questionnaire to Jewish Orthodox people?
So this was among the non-Orthodox. Within the Orthodox, the statistics are very different. Yeah. So the question is it important? Well, I don't have the numbers with me, but indeed they are different. And different indications. We have the same thing of the attachment to Israel. Again, we don't need to go into all of it. But again, you see things a sense of alienation from Israel. 20% of the young people, only 3% of the older people. There's questions whether Israel is sincere about seeking peace. Even in the ages 65 and above, almost less than half of American Jews, again non-Orthodox, feel that Israel is sincere about peace.
One question. This is from 2014.
Right.
There are 6 years. How it's getting worse or better now?
Worse. Definitely worse. And even some people would say, well, we need to make sure that everybody gets to Israel and then they'll feel differently. But we see on this that a large percentage of the people have already been to Israel and are still giving these kinds of answers. I won't go into this. It's different degrees of where people stand on the political spectrum. But I also want to say that disappointments with Israel are not only the case within diaspora Jewry. I'm going to show you now a few examples of things that are happening in things that are coming out in Israel itself. The Israelis, how many Israelis do we have in the room? Okay, so you all know the book Boom Trach Makara Habalon Hitpotzetz. Habalon Nikra. It's from a famous children's storybook about Al Tidar, don't worry, Iran, Zeh Sofo Shel Kol Balon. Every balloon is going to explode. So you shouldn't be depressed about it. But here we have a play on words. Instead of a balloon, they have a halom. What's a halom?
Dream.
A dream. So here you have Herzl sitting there almost crying, saying, don't, and suddenly, boom, trach. What happened? The balloon burst, the balloon got torn apart. And It's something that's very resonant for Israelis. And the question really is for us, if that's really the end of every dream, is every dream going to burst, or can we still expect to go about building this Jewish state based on the dreams that we had? This is an example of graffiti. I was walking through a neighborhood in Neve Tzedek, a gentrified neighborhood in Tel Aviv, and I see on the wall, you're all familiar with Im Tirtzu Ein Zu Agada? If you will it, it is no dream. You know that phrase from Herzl? So here, they took the same words, but with different punctuation. And it's written Im Tirtzu Ein. If you want, it isn't there, 3 exclamation marks. Zu Agada. It's all make-believe. If you will it, it's not. It's a fairy tale. Okay. So again, it's a response to to Herzl's dreams of some of what's going on in Israel today. This is graffiti also that appears in different places around Tel Aviv. Lorenzi, you don't want it? Okay, so forget about it. It's you don't need to trouble yourself with such things. An art gallery in the David Intercontinental Hotel in Tel Aviv, a very upscale art gallery, and I was walking by and I see this picture of Herzl with a tear coming down from his eye, as though he's looking out on what's going on with Israel, with the Tel Aviv that he dreamed about in Neuland. Here he's standing with Ben Gurion, both of them looking down on the Israel that has emerged. And both of them disappointed with some of what they're seeing. And here from demonstrations, there were popular demonstrations, Ha'am Rotzeh Tzedek חברתי, the people want social justice. We talked about the Gesher Party. And here you have Herzl demands social justice. Another example, I won't play it now, Adag Nachash, you're familiar with the band Adag Nachash? So they have a famous song about hip-hop Zioni, it's called, the Zionist hip-hop, and they talk about Herzl, and the guy must be, what is he, standing out on the porch to see what's going on? He must be stoned out of his mind. And again, this is from a few years ago when we had the big demonstrations in Tel Aviv demanding social justice. This is the only person who got dressed up as Herzl, standing on a porch, looking out, again with the famous slogan, Im Tirtzu Ein Zu Agada. And I actually think that all of these caricatures and graffiti referencing Herzl is really a very, very positive thing. The fact that there's disappointment with what's happening out there, I'm not glad about the reasons for the disappointment, but the fact that people are taking the dream very seriously and feel that Israel was created to not only as a safe place, as a refuge for Jews to live in, but also as something where there'd be a commitment to creating that special kind of society, to me is a very valuable thing, and really is an expression of not just the younger generation in Israel, but of many people in Israel wanting to reclaim the Zionist dream. And I want to share this quote with you. We have it up here in 3 languages. Somebody want to read it in Spanish?
Creo verdaderamente que incluso después de que poseamos nuestra tierra, la tierra de Israel, el sionismo no dejará de ser una idea. Como yo entiendo el sionismo, este incluye no solo el deseo vivo de un territorio en la tierra prometida, adquirido por la ley, para nuestro cansado pueblo, sino también el deseo vivo para su realización moral y espiritual.
Okay, who said that? Herzl, okay.
We used it 2 years ago in our Congress.
In our science Congress.
Okay, very good. So indeed, the point that I want to make here is that from its very inception, Zionism was not only about creating that safe place, but also about forging a society that we can all really feel very proud of. And I'm now going to suggest kind of a model for teaching about Israel. The basic and fundamental part, of course, even for Herzl, and what brought Herzl to Zionism? How much have you learned at school and your youth movements? This you didn't learn from CNN, I know. What brought Herzl to Zionism? Okay, but what brought him to Dreyfus. We have one winner of the. You don't see her name. Okay. All right. So it was the anti-Semitism that brought Herzl around to becoming a Zionist. For a long time, all he wanted was to be accepted in the society in which he lived as a man of letters. He was a playwright. He was a journalist. And what really concerned him was making it in this non-Jewish world. He never denied his Judaism. He was always proud of it, but he wasn't involved. And it was really the Dreyfus affair, as one of many things, that he was covering as a correspondent for the Neue Freie Presse, the most prominent newspaper of the day, that brought him to the concept of Zionism and the need for this refugio, is that right, a safe place for Jews to live in. And that was the first Zionist book that he wrote called Der Judenstaat. And it was it's a short booklet. I don't know how many of you have read it or have to read it for the Zionist quiz. Not very long. And it's his analysis of the condition of the Jewish people and his conclusion that no matter how much we wanted to be accepted in the societies in which we were living, we were eventually rejected. And at the end of the Dreyfus affair, when Dreyfus was found guilty and the ceremony in which he was publicly humiliated, he heard a cry of the mob. What was the mob saying? Death to the Jews, okay? Not death to Dreyfus. And for Herzl, this was really a eureka moment, I could say, where he recognized this guy who was completely assimilated as a Dreyfus. He was not in any way expressed or involved with his Jewish life. He was a French officer, indeed a loyal French officer. He was framed, he wasn't really guilty. But the crowds cried out death to the Jews because of this one person. But Herzl didn't stop with Der Judenstaat. And he wrote this other book that we've talked about Neuland, this need for this national home. It's this national home that I think we really need to focus on. We can't forget the need for a safe place for Jews to live. Anti-Semitism is again on the rise around the world. Is it felt at all in Mexico? Not so much, okay? And I, growing up in America, never felt any anti-Semitism. And if somebody asked me, would it erupt again, I would say they were crazy. And yet we know over the last year or so, the shootings in the synagogues and the swastikas. So I don't want to ignore the need for a safe place, but I do want to focus on this national home, this Bayit Leumi, this Neuland that he dreamed of, which today, of course, has become the state, the Tel Aviv, in a sense, with Tel Aviv being a microcosm for it. And I want to suggest what the values are that would make this state really a Jewish state. And I'm going to share with you now a few quotes from Neuland. Somebody else want to read it in Spanish?
Todos los edificios estaban destinados a fines religiosos y benéficos, como los hospedajes para peregrinos de todas las denominaciones, las instituciones de beneficencia, clínicas y hospitales musulmanes, judíos y cristianos se alzaban una junto a la otra. En medio de una gran plaza estaba el magnífico Palacio de la Paz, donde se realizaban congresos internacionales de amantes de la paz y científicos. Jerusalén era ahora el hogar de los mejores esfuerzos del espíritu humano, la fe, el amor y el saber.
Okay, so this is taking place, it's a novel, and you have a bunch of people that are touring this Jewish state that he imagined coming into being in an imaginary 1923. He wrote the book back in 1902. And it's what he imagined this state looking like. And here it's very, very universal, Jews, Christians, Muslims, all living side by side. And here, another one, you have somebody who's, there's a political rally of farmers that are taking place, and you have the candidate saying the following to the people that are out there. Somebody else want to read?
I will read.
Okay.
Todo lo que hayáis cultivado carecerá de valor y vuestros campos volverán a ser estériles, a menos que cultivéis también la libertad de pensamiento y de expresión, la generosidad del espíritu y el amor a la humanidad. Estas son las cosas que deberéis apreciar y consolidar.
Okay, so again, you can build up this country, but don't lose sight of the values that, that we came here to give expression to. And I won't go into all of it now, we don't have time, but he wrote about so many different things. Maybe we'll just read a couple of them. The first one.
Sobre el estatus de la mujer. En nuestra nueva sociedad, las mujeres tienen derechos plenos e iguales. Su derecho a votar y a ser candidatas para un cargo público está garantizado.
When did women get the right to vote in Mexico? 1947, okay, so he wrote this in 1902. At the second, I can't say at the first Zionist Congress, but already at the second Zionist Congress, women were able to be to vote and to be elected as representatives. And he writes in this novel, they're talking about the status of women, and of course they have the right to vote. What else do we have up there? He writes about many different things in terms of, we'll take that also one about the Arabs that follows.
Sobre las relaciones entre árabes y judíos. Los judíos nos han enriquecido. ¿Por qué debemos estar enojados con ellos? Moran entre nosotros como hermanos. ¿Por qué no debemos amarlos? Dicho por Rashid Bey, un árabe prominente, explicando las relaciones entre árabes y judíos en la nueva sociedad.
Okay, so he wasn't right about everything, but he imagined a society in which the Arabs and Jews would be living closely together. Again, we don't have time to go into all of this, or maybe since we're in a school education, the last one that's down there.
Sobre la educación, no recompensamos ni castigamos a nuestros niños por las transacciones comerciales de sus padres. Cada generación implica un nuevo comienzo. Por eso todas nuestras instituciones educativas son gratuitas, desde las escuelas primarias hasta la Universidad de Sion. Todos los alumnos deben usar la misma ropa sencilla. Pensamos que no es ético individualizar a los niños de acuerdo con la riqueza o la posición social de sus padres. Eso sería malo para todos. Los niños de familias acomodadas serían perezosos y arrogantes y los otros estarían amargados.
Okay, so I don't know if there's been discussions and debates at this school and at the other schools, whether uniforms or not uniforms, and at what age you can wear your own clothes and so on and so forth. But again, he imagined in this state, to me it's amazing, before there was any piece of land, he was thinking about every aspect of the society. So I want to come back to this, to the kind of home that we're building here, and I want to suggest that this Jewish state that we're building has three foundations, the three elements that are particularly important. Who are we building this country for? I've now put answers already up there. So we're building it for the Jewish people, right? Where were we going to build it? Eretz Yisrael. Now, some of you may know that there were other suggestions along the way. when he originally wrote the Judenstaat, he said it could be in Israel, it could be Argentina. The Uganda only came 6 years later. But even then, Herzl was adamant that if it was to be in Uganda, that was a temporary thing. We won't go into it now. And the third element that I want to suggest here is Torah Yisrael. Every society, well, I'll ask you, institutions that make up any society. What do you have to have in a society that...
Laws.
Laws, okay, excellent. Values.
Religion.
Do you need it?
You don't, but...
Right, okay.
Culture.
Culture, excellent.
Medicine.
You're not just stretching, good, okay.
Medicine,
okay.
Education.
Educational system, culture, I think was mentioned, you mentioned the laws, the legal system, security, and so on and so forth. And the question is, what is going to be? You're creating a new state. What's going to impact on all of those different institutions of which any society is created? And I put Torah Yisrael up here, not in the narrow sense of the 5 books of Moses handed down at Mount Sinai, but really as the Jewish civilization as it evolved over the years. And indeed, we have ongoing debates in Israel how much the Torah or Jewish law should be a part of the legal system. What is taught in the schools? You know, in Israel we have religious schools and we have secular schools. Is Bible taught in the secular schools? Sure. Okay. For sure, it's considered to be an essential element of our history and our heritage and so on. And I think since we do have the markers, well, you know what, I'll skip it because we're short on time. So for me, one of the questions when we're teaching about Israel is to figure out for the student, for the person learning about this, where do I fit into all of these questions? I will use the markers for a second. Which is for which? I don't want to. This is for the board.
Yes.
Okay. So I drew my triangle like this, because it fit nicely on top of my miklat, on top of my shelter that I needed there. But you know that there are an infinite number of ways to draw a triangle, right? And we don't know what shape, what our real Israel, what our real Tel Aviv is going to look like. And part of why we don't know about that, I mean, I could leave this and say, this is what you should be teaching about Israel. Anti-Semitism, we needed a safe place to live. Nobody wants to live in a shelter. Have any of you spent any time in a shelter in Israel? What's it like? Not so good, okay? How do you feel in a shelter?
Protected, because, okay, I'm in the same place, but it's not the ideal thing.
Right, okay, you're stuck there. Many people don't feel particularly safe, even though you're supposed to feel safe, but there's bombs going out outside and you hear things. Right. It's certainly a place you don't want to stay. And as soon as the all-clear siren sounds, you get out. Nobody wants to be there. You're cut off from the rest of the world. You don't know what's going on. It gets very crowded if a lot of people get stuck in a shelter.
Yes, but Israel is very lucky to have one, like every 10 meters. There's like countries that don't even have an army war constantly.
Okay, so we're lucky to have it because we need it, but we're not lucky that we need it. That's and I asked the question because psychologically, if we think of Israel only as a shelter, only as a place that we have to be because the whole world is against us, as soon as we feel, I can get a green card and go to Canada or Mexico or someplace else, I'm going to get up and leave. So for me, it's important that we think of Israel not just as that shelter, but really as this, as the kind of house that we would like to build. But I can't leave this as a model without going into some very difficult questions. I talked about Am Yisrael. But if I talk about Am Yisrael and I say every Jew has a right to live in Israel, what do I have to ask? Who is a Jew? Okay? And we're familiar with those different kinds of issues and matters of conversion in Israel, and who's accepted and who's not accepted. And what my connection is to the people who are living, to Jews outside of Israel. And I have to, and with Eretz Yisrael, what do I have to ask about Eretz Yisrael? We want to build in the land of Israel. What do I have to decide? Which land, which borders? Trump's new deal of the century. Do we annex or do we not annex? And so on and so forth. So with that too, the boundaries, the meaning of the land of Israel. How many of you have already visited Israel? Okay, a good number of you. How many of you have planted a tree in Israel? Some of you. Okay. Does it feel different planting a tree in Israel than it does in Mexico City? Why? It might be hard to articulate, but somehow are we drawn physically to the land of Israel? Does it mean something different? Is it the landscape? Is it the biblical concept, and so on and so forth? So the whole question of the meaning of Israel. Did we liberate the land or did we conquer the land? Is it occupation or is it redemption? And on Torah Yisrael, perhaps the most problematic, what's the issues of Torah Yisrael? There's two big movie complexes in Israel, in Jerusalem. One called Cinema City and one called Yes Planet. Are they open on Shabbat or not? No. That's one correct answer. Yes is the other correct answer. One is open and one isn't open. One is built on municipal land and the condition was that it would have to be closed, and the other was built on private land and said it could be open. And now the ones in the municipal land are suing the city, saying we can't survive economically because Yes Planet is open and Cinema City is closed. Should it be closed? Should it not be closed? So even if we could all agree about what the halakha is, what Jewish law is, there's a lot of questions as to what role Jewish law should have in the Jewish state. So there are questions that we have to ask, also in here abroad. Do I feel closer to the ultra-Orthodox in Israel or to my non-Jewish friends here in Mexico, Costa Rica, or any place else? To whom do I feel an allegiance? I might feel less close but more responsible for. What are my responsibilities as part of the Jewish people? Can I possibly consider marrying somebody who's not Jewish? So a lot of questions come up regarding what it means to be part of Am Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael, what matters to me in determining Israel's borders? Is it biblical promises? Is it what the generals say? Is it what the rabbis say? And if we have time, I would go into it and tell you that it doesn't matter whether you ask the rabbis or the generals. You're going to get generals that say the only way to keep Israel secure is to hold on to every inch. And others will say the only way to make Israel safe is to give it back because that will bring back peace and so on. So I see that we're running out of time. Okay, and this last one is, what do we mean by a Jewish state? I used the phrase der Judenstaat before, which is in German. How do you translate der Judenstaat? In English, what's the book called?
State of
Jews.
In Hebrew, it's called the State of the Jews, Medinat HaYehudim, the State of the Jews. In English, it's called the Jewish State. I don't know what it's called in Spanish. So the Jewish state, okay? Of the Jews, okay. Now Herzl personally approved both translations in the English and the Hebrew, two completely different things. It's less of concern to me what we can talk about what the differences are between the Jewish state and the state of the Jews, and which we want and how we get there. The bottom line is, since we're out of time, is that, as I said before, there are many different ways to draw a triangle. And I explained already why I drew mine the way I did. But I think in teaching about Israel, we need to engage students, think through it ourselves as well, what all of those things of Am Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, and Torah Yisrael mean to me, and again, where I fit in with all of this. And Ma Halom Shali, what's my dream? What kind of Israel do I want to create? This is from the Jerusalem program. Part of the idea, maybe we'll just read this and end with this. Somebody want to read on the, you're closest, you want to just read on the Spanish on the bottom?
El fortalecimiento de Israel como Estado judío sionista y democrático y su modelación como sociedad ejemplar, Hebrat Mofet, poseedora de un carácter moral y espiritual único, basada en el respeto mutuo del multifacético pueblo judío y enraizada en la visión profética que aspira a la paz y contribuye para la mejora del mundo. Tikkun Olam.
Okay, so that's the part of the Zionist dream that the World Zionist Organization developed for itself. And the last thing that I'll just really end with this, that for me, 3 takeaways of what Israel education, or Zionist education needs to be. Israel education need to convey both the fundamental legitimacy of the Zionist idea, that need for that refuge, that safe place to live, the anti-Semitism and so on, but not to end there, to also convey the inspirational power of the Zionist vision all the way back from Herzl's days. Teaching about Israel, helping our students make sense of Israel, only makes sense if it helps them make sense of being who they are. We're not learning about Scotland, we're not learning about France, we're not learning about Japan. Our education about Israel is something very different. It should raise lots of questions for us about what being Jewish is. And with any disappointments that we might have in Israel, whether it's the corruption, the social injustice, and so on, we have to recognize that Israel is a work in progress. We should feel the pride, the amazing things that Israel has already done, but we should also embrace the task ahead of us. The challenge of teaching Israel is teaching the challenge of Israel. And with that, I will end just with this little picture. Israel in the diaspora, and the bridge sometimes might feel a little bit broken. The answer there to me, Israel education has to complete that bridge. And thank you for everything you've been doing. So I hope your English got a lot better during that hour.
We would like you to know that we were here 2 years ago. We made a congress and the tables of the students were exactly about the...
Excellent. Thank you. Enjoyed having you here. You know what, you have, yeah, I've got all sorts of,
Thank you. Thank you.
it's great to have all the students here. Safe buffet.
Shall we meet outside?
I wanted to ask to share it again.
Left.
I have, after the thing ends, I have all sorts of other partial slides and so on, so if you don't mind all of that.
No, I don't at all.
It's got stuff in Hebrew as well.
I prefer the Hebrew. No. But if you're okay, sure, I will just take a few photos that I want.
Okay. I would only,
and I will make a couple of
there's all sorts of stuff here that might be relevant to you right now. That's for the second lecture.
Hola.
I'm happy to. I'll have to look at the schedule for Horaj Israel.
Okay.
And
even though you're going
I'll be here. Yeah, I know the morning is not good because I've been meeting with the ambassador, the Israeli ambassador.
students like here.
Until what time?
Until 2:30.
I know I'll be back. Just give me a minute, or you want to connect later, or yeah, let's just do this. I think pretty much any time Thursday. What? I'll just have to check when I'm back here from the. Artist. That's you. What does it say? Bridging the gap. That's not this one. Switch to. And it's pretty heavy because the slide of Dag Nahash has the music, has the video. I'm just going to look at the...
I just wanted to show you that I also made a survey with my students in how they are their solidarity with Israel, and as they see
Wow, with what different colors? Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Wow.
Nothing, a little bit red or tone. So in the case of Israel,
I'll trade you. I'll give you my PowerPoint. And this would be because I have no such thing.
Even though they are not Israeli, some of them said, "I feel Israeli." So it was a.
Some of them must be Israeli, though, no? There must be children here of
Israeli parents, or they were born in Israel, but they felt that. No, I think it's very important. They were a little afraid of Jakarta here, but they didn't.
No, they were great. They were great. So tomorrow, if you want to set the time.
Okay.
Yeah, I will be back here. I have a meeting with the Israeli ambassador until 11:30. How far is the embassy from?
Do you need a tram there? I take you there if you want.
No, Ari is taking me there.
All right. It's about half an hour from here.
So it's 12:30.
Excellent. 12:30. It will
Is
be
there a
okay.
time where the class starts? 12:15, 12:40, 12:30.
I can arrange that. It doesn't.
Okay.
I can take them.
So where would I meet with them?
No, can I have your phone number? So,
I'll give it to you. I have it here. I'll give it to you.
She's gonna give you. I'm gonna send you a WhatsApp, and whenever you arrive, I'm gonna arrange that we have the meeting room over there that you can.
And with some of the same students?
Yes, but they also I have students from Uzbek that they couldn't be here today.
So what I could do with it is I could go into those three things of Am Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, and Torah Yisrael, and challenge them.
Because we are now studying all the very young